I'm at the stage now where I'm still gaining benefits from psychedelics, but even then I take them so rarely. Some people think that just because I have this channel I must trip all the time, but no, opposite. In fact,
People
the more
for some reason
experiences
also
the
assume,
more experience I have, the less I do it. The more I respect these substances, the more trepidation I tend to have, you know. But it's out of respect.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
people also assume every new video you're tripping. I mean, the people say, I think you're tripping too much, when I just made a video talking about some of the benefits of psilocybin. So I want it to be known that I haven't done psilocybin in, half a year. And because last time it scared the hell out of me. It beat me down to the ground, told me that I was an egotistical fraud, and just basically told me to take a break. Let's just say that.
Do you think that having a channel talking about psychedelics, teaching the masses, make it like, I don't know, maybe you're more prone to get punished in this way for egotistical reasons?
I think if you do have a teacher mentality, then you're definitely going to get punished, because my mentality is more like I'm doing bioassays of substances and kind of just telling you what my experience was like. I don't feel that, maybe once I'm a master's graduate or something like that, I'll feel a lot more comfortable with really calling myself like a pharmacology educator and things like that.
Right.
But at the moment, any education I'm doing is basically by someone saying, oh, I'm not going to do that now, or I saw what happened to him. I really can't stand on my soapbox yet and truly talk about what psychedelics are like for everybody.
Yeah, still in the beginner stages. I feel like that as well.
Yeah.
So I think at the start, I don't think I ever had like, oh, I'm a teacher or I'm an expert. Never like that, but maybe subconsciously I did. I don't know, just looking back.
I might too, when I reflect on it, it's something that can creep up.
Yeah. I think like now that's why I have more of a kind of documentary filmmaker approach, and just.
I like that, man. You make super high quality stuff.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Like, it's like Vice level. It's very strange to see these, I don't know. I'm kind of obsessed with this view of how, let's say, archaeologists in 100 years will see our time. And they're just going to see this massive output of mobile creativity. Like the fact that my entire channel's on my phone, the fact that you had mostly mobile equipment to go record all the stuff that you did. Like, you didn't need this giant on the shoulder, camera and things like that. Yeah. You're putting out with ratings similar to some news channels this mobile content that's informative.
Yeah, it's an interesting position to be in. I feel like I even have like a little bit of an anthropologist type of approach. That's why it's not even all about psychedelics. Like, for example, I did a documentary on the toxic weed epidemic in Chile, in South America, and I went to like the ghetto streets, picked up like this toxic weed and kind of interviewing people living that life. Like, I love those kind of raw human perspectives, and not trying to give like this is what this means scientifically or historically. Like, no, I'm just pure raw perspective, I guess,
Does that trip you out though, that you're giving these you're almost giving these glimpses, into these things that would not have been glimpsed otherwise, like maybe in another context or another documentary, but the moments and the people that you feature, it really does kind of, tickle the timeline a little bit when I think about it.
It's really weird, and just kind of looking back on it, it's like it all makes sense, because like growing up I was always dabbling in the dark arts and kind of living in the underworld in a lot of ways, getting into like drugs and hanging out with shady characters, and then I went through my spiritual awakening, completely got away from that. But even now I think a lot of these people have stories to tell, and I think we can learn a lot from even the harshest place of the world that I think a lot of people shy away from. And I see this a lot in spirituality, where we're overly focused on the positive and the beauty, but then we shy away from like the ugliness, the evil, the suffering.
The failure of polarity. We're not being polar.
Yeah, what do? We call it an illusion, right? Oh, evil doesn't exist, because that way if I say that, I don't have to deal with it, when just because...
Think about how quickly...
Oh, sorry, I'll just say this one thing. It's like, good and evil, like, yes, it's relative, but it doesn't mean that these forces don't have a real effect on human beings. You know what I mean? Like, just because something is relative, it doesn't mean that it's not real. I think that's a big misconception in woo-woo, modern, new age spirituality. But yeah, what were you going to say?
Oh, you just had me excited with your train of thought there. I was just thinking, you notice nobody ever, many modern Christians, you might say, would dismiss notions of hell and things like that, but people are not as quick to throw away the idea of heaven. People are very fast to throw away the suffering and the eternal torment. That's silly. That could never exist. But, the eternal afterlife with the eternal donuts and things of that nature, we have no problem, maybe, being open-minded to. But hell, no way. That's foolish. That's child thinking.
Yeah, can't be. But then even hell, like, it's real on this plane, man. You just have to travel, look around. The hell is real. Fucking real, man, and it's a bottomless pit. And of course there's different approaches. Like, you can have a more fear-mongering approach, like do good or you're going to burn in hell forever, or just kind of like, hey, don't let the fear consume you, but at the same time you got to acknowledge it, because if you don't acknowledge the darkness or the shadow, then it's going to grow in this really ugly way. And that's why so many spiritual gurus, actually one recently, I won't say the name, but a lot of spiritual gurus end up sexually attacking young women because they're celibate, and they repress that shit so much, and they build themselves up to be like this perfect being, enlightened being who's in touch with all the goodness of the world. And because they're so actively repressing all the darkness, then it grows in ugly ways, so that's why it's always important, at least for me, to not give it power. Of course not, always be rooted in your light and your love, your compassion, but at least acknowledge it, man. Like,
I mean, it's like if we can envision a utopia where everything is as maximally good as it could be, then we can easily envision where we're all the product of our own mistakes and suffering and insecurities and everything of that negative nature.
Yeah, man. And I've had some heavy psychedelic trips where I would get tapped into the collective suffering of humanity and live out lives. Like, for example, live out like a homeless person. How would they feel? Or an old person who has no loved ones. He's just estranged from his family, living with regret on his deathbed, on the hospital, dying alone, or living as a child African soldier who's high on meth and forced to kill his own father. Just shit like that. And that's just like 3 little tiny examples of the totality. Like, it's heavy, man. It's so heavy to the point where you're just begging the psychedelic for it to stop. Like, please make this stop. This is too much. I understand, but
I think that's why I'm so sucked into philosophies that start by basically just asserting that life is suffering. Like, of course, Buddhism might call suffering many different things, but generally they say suffering. Stoicism just asserts that you're really just pushing the rock uphill and being diligent despite suffering. All of these things are attractive to me because they seem to acknowledge the first universal truth and then kind of move outward from there. Because happiness is definitely something that comes into your life, but it seems much more likely that suffering is, I guess I would just say suffering is more easily provable than joy and happiness.
Well, and happiness, that's part of the polarity, to have happiness, it's already attached to sadness, I think peace is probably a better or a more practical emotion to chase after if you're going to chase after something, because it's like the balance of everything. Because I went through an ayahuasca trip where, the previous one I asked for like understanding and service and not like these big connotations, and then it was like, but with knowledge, of course, it's too much. So then
You're scaring me, Tom. I was kind of thinking those same words before I went into mine.
Yeah. Just be careful what you wish for, because you will get what you want.
Man.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't want to influence how you approach these things, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know, knowledge. It's infinite, man. It's infinite. There's actually an old Marvel comic where Thor, he asked for infinite knowledge, and he ended up getting both his eyes taken out because it's too much. You can't bear that shit.
In Indiana Jones as well, with the crystal skull, where he's just taking in all this ancient knowledge. And
what was that? Wasn't that relating to the covenant or something in the Bible? I've heard that too. Like the
I don't know.
It's like God. I don't know. Maybe the knowledge or the power of God is too much that for them to touch it, you're gonna get destroyed by it.